G'day everyone and welcome to the Trekzone Spotlight. Today's guest, you may not recognise his name, but you should certainly recognise his work. He's written a couple of Star Trek books, including Foreign Foes, Dead Zone, Forever Dark in the TNG series, and Battle Lines for Voyager as well. His name is Mr. Dave Galanter. Dave, thanks so much for your time and welcome to the Trekzone Spotlight.
Nice to see you.
Now tell us a little bit about you as an author. How did you get started as an author and writing for Star Trek?
I actually met a couple of Star Trek authors, or a Star Trek author she wrote with her husband when I was very young, and they became friends. And I was trying to become a writer separate from them, and a professor of mine in college suggested I actually show them some of my work, which I did. And I ended up writing my first next-gen novel with Diane Carey's husband, Greg Broder. They've been friends of mine now for 30 years, which I'm 46, so if you do the math, it's since I was 16 years old. And Diane pretty much taught me how to write. Greg taught me how to plot, because that's generally what his character development and plot were his areas. And so the first 4 or so books that I did with Greg. But it was easier for them to work as a team. As a married couple, they made all the money, but I had to split whatever I was doing with Greg. And the truth was, I did the writing, and he did sort of editing and plot. And the fool taught me how to do it, so he ended up teaching me out of a job for himself.
Oh.
And so my solo work since then in Trek has been several novellas, short stories, and the last 2 were original series novels, both sort of centering on Spock, which have done well, I guess, in some reviews, and I certainly am very fond of them because the original series is my fondness for that is more than the other shows, even though I've liked pretty much all of them to some degree or another.
So tell us a little bit about those original series novels or novellas. Are they still available? Where can we get them?
Troublesome Mind is a full novel. It came out, I think, in 2009. And last year came out a book called Crisis of Consciousness. Troublesome Mind is a very Spock-centric novel. A little bit less so for Crisis of Consciousness, but still very sort of Spock-oriented. Spock is one of my favorite characters, and in general, where a classic series is concerned, I like focusing on Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as best I can. I think they're sort of the more important characters, although we do see the budding love affair between Carolyn Palamas and Scotty in Crisis of Consciousness. One of the things you can do in a book is focus a little bit more on some of the non-major lead characters. And so we saw in Who Mourns for Adonis that they had a relationship, and this happens a little bit before that and allows us to see why do they have a relationship? Why is he a little bit smitten with her? And hopefully that's something that fans enjoy.
What draws you to the original series?
Part of it is probably because I grew up on it. I mean, I'm not old enough to have seen it in its original broadcast, but my mom was a science fiction fan and a Star Trek fan. She had introduced me to Star Trek, I think probably through the animated series when I was 6 or 7, something like that, and that pushed me into the regular show. Which, you know, there's something in a lot of adult shows back in the 60s and 70s that a kid could sort of latch onto and get into, even if we didn't understand all of the complexities of character. And I think original Star Trek has awesome characters, and that's deep, multi-layered characters, which isn't always the case with a show from the 60s. And it holds up. In fact, when I met my wife, she was a Next Generation fan, but hadn't really watched the original series. And one of the things we did is watch the original series together, and it made her a fan. She's just 3 years younger than I. She didn't get really exposed to the original series. Picard was her captain.
How does that work in the relationship? Obviously, I would say that Kirk would be your captain. Has that caused some friction over the years?
No, that's really not insane. It's funny. Couples who share a fandom here and there don't have to share everything. We're both probably bigger Doctor Who fans than we are. Well, I'm a bigger Star Trek fan probably, but she's not as big. She's a Star Wars person, and yet
that's even worse.
In that mixed marriage, it seems to be working, because I can take her to a Star Trek movie, she can take me to a Star Wars movie, and we haven't filed for divorce at all.
Well, you mentioned that there is a bit of a Doctor Who fanaticism in your marriage. Who is your favourite Doctor?
It's shared for me. I would say the Second Doctor and the 11th Doctor are probably my favorites. Although I still have a soft place in my heart for my first Doctor, my Doctor, who was the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, because I was one of those geeky science fiction kids who would watch Doctor Who here on public television when I was a kid. That was the way we had access to it, because it was a BBC show. And I think my wife is probably more an 11th Doctor person, although she likes 10 as well. I mean, I like them all. There's something to like in all of them. I like Peter Capaldi, which I hear rumblings of, he's not, he's this, he's that. You know what? He's the Doctor.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Now we're going to come back to Star Trek, because the reason that your name's popped up in some news cycles recently is that 1701 News discovered that you had a bit of a run-in with everybody's favourite fan production at the moment, Star Trek Axanar. Can you give us a little bit of background onto what happened?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a run-in per se, other than I was very disheartened by the entire Axanar saga. The day that the lawsuit dropped, I thought, well, gee, that's too bad. And I even sent a message to Alec at the time that said, hey, sorry this is happening, hope it works out. Because I didn't know exactly what depths Axanar had sunk to in making sure that they broke all of the tacit rules for fan films, including saying that they weren't a fan film. Although I sort of knew that. I'd heard rumblings about that online, and even mentioned to Alec, hey, there's nothing wrong with being a fan film. But he was very, very adamant that it was a professional production. And that probably tossed up some red flags. And then after the lawsuit dropped, I saw all of these things online about selling coffee and, Starship perks in a donor store. And then I found out that I was on IMDb as the story editor, and he had been using my name in a press pack without my knowledge or permission as a story editor, which I didn't story edit. Because I wasn't, I was involved. He'd asked me through James Cawley, probably 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was that he began, as he was writing his first draft, he asked me for some comments and suggestions and notes, and I did that. I probably put in maybe, a lunch hour here, a half hour there in the evening, just reading his draft and then sending it back. With notes and comments in it, some of which he took, some of which he seriously didn't take, which was fine with me. I didn't have, a reason to care. My name wasn't going to go on it. So, I do this sort of thing for beginning writers and writing workshops at conventions. They'll ask you a question, you'll give a comment, you'll try and point them in the right direction, something that they can apply to their whole work is a good example. One of the things I said to Alec was, you don't have characters talking how real people talk. You should read your dialogue out loud as you're writing it. And if you can even have a table read with a bunch of people reading the lines, it should come off to you as to whether it sounds, natural to the ear or not. Sometimes when you put stuff down on a page, it doesn't. So it was that sort of thing. And I would give him dialogue suggestions. Why do you have someone saying this instead of that? And apparently he took a lot of that, but didn't like a lot of my other suggestions and didn't take them. And that was fine because, it's his work, I felt. That's all when it was a fan film. When he was going to spend, I don't know how much, $10, $20, $30,000, something like that, and film it on the New Voyages sets in upstate New York. And he seemed, real excited about it, and it seemed like a kick-butt project. And then Christian Gossett got on board, and I was very impressed with him. And I thought, well, good going. All of a sudden, it became something much larger, I guess, through Kickstarter. And somehow it became some professional endeavor. I had no idea he was paying himself a salary. My opinion is that the only people that have the right to pay someone to produce Star Trek as a producer are Paramount and CBS. So I sort of was offended by that. I was offended by Alec in his public statements, sort of belittling Star Trek New Voyages. James Cawley is a close friend of mine, or I would consider him a close friend. I've known him for 8 or 9 years. And Vic of Star Trek Continues, he was sort of belittling, which didn't sit well with me either. And finally, I think it was a month after, I sort of, sent Alec a message saying, hey, I don't like all I'm hearing. You don't have to answer it to me. This sounds really shady to me. And I don't like, what you said about the other fan films. He replied that basically they started it, which I think is ridiculous and sort of a grade school answer. And that was the last we talked until Mike Hinman of 1701 News interviewed me. And then I got a couple of texts from Alec, which were along the lines of, I guess, some sort of soft intimidation or trying to tell me that I shouldn't be talking to Hinman, which is just silly. I don't know how he could intimidate me. He said there was nothing in it for me to have this interview, which that was after the interview was done. So, but there was nothing not in it for me. I was just telling the truth. The truth being that about a year ago, maybe a little more, Alec had reached out to me to ask about doing a series of novellas that he wanted to do, background stories on some of the Axanar characters. And he asked me, how much do you pay someone to write a novella? How many pages should it be? I told him it shouldn't be pages, it should be words. And I told him, those things. And I said, but you have to be licensed for this. And he was like, well, are you interested in writing one? Because I'm working on licensing. And I was like, wow, that had surprised me. This was before I was paying attention to much of what Axanar was doing. And Alec had said to me that he had a lot of contacts at CBS way back when, and he was their archivist or something like that. Not quite sure what that was even then. I've since learned it's not quite true. At least not in some sort of paid position for them. I guess he was doing props or something through PropWorks. And I thought, okay, maybe it's possible. Maybe he knows folks. So I said, hey, sure, you get licensed, give me a buzz. Some months after that, I think that was in the spring, I think toward the end of summer, he called me back and he asked me again. He said, do you want to write this novella? And I said, did you get licensing? And he said, no, we couldn't do that. And I said, well, then I can't do it. I can't accept money to write prose Trek. That's what I do professionally. And, editors would not like that. They'd warned me off, stuff like that. And also, it's just not, when I sign a contract with Simon & Schuster's Pocket Books, they actually own my notes on Star Trek. At least that was what the first contract said years ago. I haven't read fully a contract in many years. But they make it very clear that, look, we own this. This is Star Trek. This is a licensed property. You're a worker for hire, a writer for hire. And he then suggested I could just write it under a pen name and still get paid for it, which was a little shocking. And I told him no. I remember calling my wife after that and sort of explaining to her what he said, and she was shocked, sort of a what the F sort of a response. And I said, I don't know. And at the time, I sort of thought, okay, this is an ethical lapse, and people have those. I didn't know at the time, by the way, that it was supposed to be some sort of a bound in leather volume he was going to sell as perks. When he initially told me about it, it was a PDF download that people were going to get, for supporting the project. And I think after the lawsuit dropped and I saw the list of things, including him paying himself and the Starship models and selling patches and things like that, I thought, okay, this was not an ethical lapse. This was this is his ethical default, and it angered me.
And a calculated decision as well, wasn't it? It became this business model that he wanted to create all of this stuff and be himself a professional. And he said words to the effect that many times that it was a fan film. Oh no, we're being sued. Sorry, it was a professional film. Oh no, it was a fan film. We always said it was a fan film. And he's always. Axanar has always tried to get all of these professional people on board. And Dave, what are your thoughts on that? Is that having all of these professional people, and it's certainly nothing against professional people, but that flies in the face of what a fan film or a fan production really is, isn't it?
Well, if a professional, and there are professionals involved in, I'm pretty sure, all of the major fan films, if they want to donate their time and effort into something, that's one thing. That's a fan film. I think what turned this into not a fan film wasn't just Alex saying, no, we're a professional independent Star Trek feature, which is a ridiculous and stupid thing to say, yes. Because only Paramount and CBS can do professional, legitimate Star Trek product or license them. But I think the other part of it is you cannot be someone who is, I guess, a businessman and then declare yourself a producer and a professional one at that because you've hired yourself. That, too, is quite how the world works. I mean, I can't just call myself a brain surgeon because I found a scalpel and start cutting into people's heads.
A text manual, Hippocrates or something like that, and that's how you do it. Oh, that's pretty easy. Slice.
It's bizarre. It's a bizarre sort of thing. But there are professionals. Look, I can't claim to be a professional screenwriter because I've never actually sold a screenplay or a teleplay. I consider myself a novelist and I guess a writer in general, and I can write a script, and I had written stuff for Star Trek New Voyages, and that was for free, and it was for fun, and it was a great deal of fun. But once you start hiring people, whether it's people to direct your movie or to do all of these things, I think you're starting to cross a line. But I think the real line was crossed with Alec when he decided that he needed to actually start a professional for-profit business and build a studio or a warehouse with a soundstage in it, if you'd like, and feather that nest, build that up with donations that were selling Star Trek. And honestly, I maybe it was in his Kickstarter that he was doing that. I donated to his Prelude Kickstarter.
There's no personal hatred towards the man or what he was trying to achieve? Is there? I mean, I certainly don't feel it, even though he says that we're all haters. I think the biggest thing that we're hating him for is what he's done to fan productions, and they're never going to be the same again, are they, Dave?
I don't know Alec personally, other than we've emailed and I've talked to him on the phone. He's never I've never seen him step on puppies or slap nuns. So I don't have any hatred for him.
Oh wait, I'm just receiving no, I'm kidding. We don't. He hasn't done that, and that's the biggest thing. He's taking all of this to heart, and it seems that he has a very thin skin. And I know that he was on the Trekzone Spotlight a couple of months ago and spent 35 minutes chatting with me, and then as soon as the questions got a little bit difficult for him to answer, and why aren't you supporting me? Suddenly I was anti-Axanar, and I've been branded as such by all of the fans of the production.
Well, honestly, not that there aren't professionals that are like that, but if you really want to be a good professional in a creative media sense, you have to take things like that on the chin. Quite frankly, the worst reviews that I get, I discount, and the best reviews that I get, I discount, although I thank all of them, no matter what. And the actual reviews are probably somewhere in the middle. You can't take it personally. What I would take personally is if somebody, another writer said to me X, Y, or Z, I would say, boy, why do you think that? And I would try to actually learn from it. That's how I actually learned to write. I had a writer telling me, man, this was not that good, or this is where you need to improve. And those are all good things. I don't understand Alec's behavior. I don't hate him for it. I do really disdain what he's essentially done to fan films. I think he's probably ended fan films as we know it by his irresponsibility, thumbing his nose at the IP owners. I have before, and others have made the same analogy. It's like everybody was invited to the pool party at CBS, and we were all enjoying swimming, and Alec decided to throw a kegger and sell towels. And just that's not proper. I think the other analogy I used is someone chops a tree down on your property and makes a bench out of it, and then tries to sell you the bench when they sort of kind of apologized, but was like, you weren't using that tree. That's the biggest insult, by the way. I've heard from some Axanar people and I think it might have even been one of their the defense motions, that Star Trek wasn't really being used. There have been 2 very big money-making movies recently, and quite frankly, myself and a lot of my friends have been churning out Star Trek novels for years. So the property was in fact being used, and saying that it's been in sort of bad hands, while he was also early on asking me to tell him if his script was Star Trek enough, and then to say it's not really Star Trek, and yet their Twitter account is at Star Trek Axanar, and that Vulcans aren't really Vulcans because you can't copyright pointed ears. It was just all very insulting. And
it's not Vulcan script on the robes.
Creates IP. I was insulted.
Yeah, it's not Vulcan script on the robes. It's Chinese lettering.
Yes, it's in it. You know what? I don't understand the lawyering part of it. But my guess is they have to say something, so they come up with something that sure will later be disproven, but at least they said something. I don't know. Yeah. It doesn't. I'm not a lawyer. It doesn't make any sense to me. I can only say what I believe ethically, and I believe that ethically, Peters. By the way, Peters said to me many years ago, he said, if CBS tells you to stop, you stop. And why he's abandoned that, I can't tell you.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's sort of been my philosophy as well. Is that you, as your analogy there, I sort of joined in on that pool party, and we all love Star Trek, so we're all doing our bits and pieces. But if the license holder turns around and says, "Hey, cut that out," you really don't have anywhere to go but to cut it out and move on and find something else to do. And for all of his faults. He's also said that, well, they didn't provide guidelines, so how were we supposed to know what we could and what we couldn't do? It's like, well, Hidden Frontier continues, New Voyages, they've all been going for the better part of a decade without a problem. Why...
And also,
as an email goes off, why does Axanar suddenly decide that it needs $1 million on crowdfunding, needs to sell coffee, needs to sell die-cast models of ships and all this sort of stuff to make
New
a film?
Voyages got a call at one point about doing, was it a Norman Spinrad script, I think? And they said, don't do this. And James Cawley said, okay. And that was it. New Voyages didn't get sued. I do not believe for a moment that Alec Peters was not told to stop what he was doing. I wasn't in the room. I don't have specific information. But as you're from Australia, I don't think you've ever seen Judge Judy. But
oh yes, it's on daytime. Yeah, it's 3 p.m. on Channel 10.
She has a saying that says, "Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining."
Yes.
Alec Peters likes to pee on people's legs and tell them that it's raining, and I just don't buy it.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, what else do you say, really? And obviously the big asterisk here for all of the AXA faithful, as I like to call them, is that these are our personal opinions, and we share them, and we're not the only ones that have these opinions. Alec has really, as you said, Dave, he's destroyed fan films as we know it. And the biggest thing that's snowballing out of this now as well is that it's not necessarily just fan productions that are at risk. I've been getting emails from fan fiction writers, from fanfiction.net, myself running the website. There's all this concern that what does this mean for fans of Star Trek who create their own works out of it?
I would like to say something to the AXA faithful out there, because I think it seems to be almost a matter of faith. I liked the idea of Axanar early on. I thought it could be a really fun fan film. I was looking forward to it. That's why I donated.
Me too.
But I think I can't get any of them to sort of explain to me the ethical problem of asking me to write bootleg Star Trek under a pen name. And by the way, the text that I got from Alec when he found out that was what was in my interview wasn't, "How could you lie about me?" It was, "Don't trust Michael Hinman. He'll twist your words," which, by the way, he didn't. He interviewed me. The interview was accurate. I said what he said that I said. And I believe that the reason Alec doesn't come out publicly and say, "No, Dave Galanter is lying," well, it's twofold. One, I'm not lying. Two, he has other authors that he's offered that to. He did not tell me who, but he did tell me that he was asking other authors. And my guess is they would come forward if he started to call me a liar. At least I hope they would. I would assume that some of them are my friends. I know a lot of Star Trek authors. And that's why he has been silent on this topic. I can't get his PR guy, Mike Bodden, to answer me about that. I couldn't get Rob Burnett to answer me about that. All of them are very silent on that particular topic, and they'd rather talk about anything else. And I think that speaks volumes.
And I think that's a pretty big takeaway out of this interview, Dave, is the fact that you've learnt that you're not the only one that Alec approached to write these novellas, and that leads to an approach. It wasn't just, I know Dave, let's see if he'll do, because I've done that. I know a few professional people, and I've sort of said, hey, can you help me out with this? That's a little bit different to polling around all of these Star Trek writers and going, I need a novella because I want to go sell a novella, but I'm not going to tell you that bit. It's just going to be, you write this and then I'll go and market it off. So that's a pretty big revelation, Dave. And he mentioned that to you, didn't he? That there were many authors.
Yes, he said. Well, he said there were other. I've heard from others that there were as many as 8 or something like that. I don't know. My assumption is that any Star Trek author approached would have said what I said. And since he hasn't announced, hey, we have these authors who are doing this work, my guess is that was the response he got from everybody. All the Star Trek authors I know are stand-up people. And I can't imagine anybody was going to buy into making a few $1,000s for an unlicensed work. It just doesn't make any sense. Logistically, it doesn't make any sense ethically, and I don't believe he got any traction on that. I will say also this: I feel like I should have known years ago that something was a little bit wrong where Axanar was concerned, not from a building a studio standpoint or anything like that, but I unfortunately had a laptop crash, and a lot of my notes and emails from that time are gone. But anything I emailed to friends that I always keep email from, I had talked about some of this to them. And one of the things that I had apparently at the time noted to Peters was he wanted an epic starship battle in Axanar. And I said to him, 150 starships in a time when there were 12, just 20 years after this, there are 12 Constitution class starships doesn't make a lot of sense. And he said, no, it has to be epic because while a Star Trek audience would understand that there are that few number of starships, a general audience won't. I had said to Alec, paraphrasing myself, you are making a fan film about with somebody else's licensed property, and it's only Star Trek faithful who are like you and I that are going to be watching this. This is not a general audience film. And he clearly disagreed, which I think is also kind of weird. If it were, by the way, a general audience film, he would have the number of backers that Veronica Mars has or had to make their film, and not the number of backers that, totals, I don't know, 8,000 or 10,000, whatever he says.
10,000, I believe. Yeah.
Who knows? Some of those are repeat, I'm sure, but I don't know. But that's certainly not a great deal. I mean, that's good for a fan film, but it's certainly not good for the professional production, wide audience movie that he seemed to think that he was making. And so, like I say, had I been tuned in to know how bizarre it was from the start, I maybe would have noticed. I'm sorry I didn't.
All right, let's move on. There is new Trek coming. There's a movie coming next month and a new TV series in January. Almost a web series, I guess you'd call it. It's coming to CBS All Access. But there is, of course, TV releases for the international markets. On what we've seen so far, Dave, are you liking what's coming up?
Well, I've liked... Actually, I liked the first trailer that dropped for Star Trek Beyond because while people reacted to the music poorly, it looked like an exciting movie. You can make a trailer to look like anything, however. So, I was optimistic cautiously that it would be good. The second trailer I really liked. I saw some good Spock moment there with Spock and McCoy moments, which I think is sort of essential to Star Trek if you can, get it in the story. It looked like an interesting story. It looked like a story with some gravitas and some real moments. So I'm looking forward to it. I like nothing better than to see Star Trek, and quite frankly, there hasn't been a Star Trek episode or movie that I haven't found something in to like, something in to sort of say, okay, this is nicely Star Trek, even if I didn't like. Tom Paris and Captain Janeway having iguana babies because they hit warp 10. I mean, you can laugh at Spock's brain too, and that's still Star Trek. So even if it's not the best movie, and my suspicion is it's going to be pretty good, it's still Star Trek. As for the series, I'm very excited for the series. I know one of the people in the writer's room. She's a Star Trek author and a friend. Kirsten Beyer. She's fantastically talented, and I'm so proud of her. The people that they're getting together from high on down, Fuller and Nick Meyer and all of the people that they've added who have a real sense of what Star Trek is and what it should be. I have never been so excited for a Star Trek series, probably not since, we heard rumors about The Next Generation. And, I was a teenager back then. I can't wait to see it. And it's so funny. People are like, "Well, you have to pay $6 for it." Well, have you looked at your cable bill? I'm
Yeah.
ready to pay that $6. I wish it were. I wish it were ready now. I would be watching it right now.
Fantastic, Dave. Thank you so much for your time. We're all out of time here on the Trekzone Spotlight, but Dave, really appreciate it, and we should head on over to, I'm guessing, Amazon at least to buy some of your books.
Absolutely, please do.